Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're very happy to have JeanAnn Harrison again here, and we're going to talk about Are You Missing Critical Mobile Tests? This webinar is hosted by XBOSoft, founded in 2006 already. We're dedicated to improving software quality, and we do that by QA consulting and software testing services. We have offices in the three main regions of the world, the US, San Francisco, Beijing, Oslo and Amsterdam, and soon we'll be on the East Coast as well. From Expo's side, we have two people. Jan on the right side, who you're speaking now, in Amsterdam, and Amy, who's on the East Coast, and she'll be chatting with you guys during the webinar. Before we get started, a couple things on housekeeping. Everyone is muted, except those that are speaking. You are very much encouraged to ask questions. Use the control panel on the right side of your screen. Amy will be there to help you. You can ask them throughout the webinar. Amy will direct them through the speakers, and we'll try to fit them in when they're appropriate. If they're not appropriate, we'll try to follow up via email at the end. At the end of the webinar, if we have time, we're going to do a general QA, and tomorrow you'll receive an email with information on the recording of the webinar. This webinar is a little bit different than what we usually do, since we're going to do a couple of exercises. And we just want to remind you, make sure your device, your mobile device, is drained and available, and have another device ready to send email to the drained device. There's going to be a slide with a hard pumping iron. You'll see it. You'll notice it when you'll see it. And at that point, JeanAnn will do a test together with us. You are very much encouraged to participate, and we will reach out for questions. And we're going to ask people to take the mic and let us know what's happening with their tests. Okay. Well, JeanAnn, we've done this a couple of times. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Maybe for the people that are new here, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with testing and mobile testing in particular?
Well, I think that as many people have had 10 years plus experience, we've all kind of fallen into it. I've actually had informally over 25 years of testing experience, and formally 13 years. And so 13, 14. And I lose track now. But anyway, mobile, I've had experience over the last 7 to 8 years now. Oh, 8 years. Oh, goodness, I keep losing track. 8 years. And I've been actively participating in a lot of conferences, as well as keeping up my own mobile skills, learning, reading, doing what I can to continue with building my skills, because anybody who's been in this business a long time knows that it changes, and it changes rapidly. So we all need to actively continue to learn. And that's my goal. By doing these webinars, I not only help to try and inspire people, but I get inspired myself, and that just pushes me further, which makes me happy. And so anyway, I've been very busy and continue to be busy, and one of the things I find is people like to chat with me online. Unless you make an appointment with me, I don't chat online. So.
JeanAnn, I know you're very busy in two worlds, right? You're great interest in sports and a great interest in testing. How do these two worlds relate? Do you get lessons from the one you can apply to the other?
Yes. In figure skating, I am an active competitive figure skater in the adult skating world, and I have many times applied my discipline from skating, from doing something over and over and over and over again, and remind myself that in testing, sometimes you have to do that same discipline, that same focus. And you also have to know when to stop and when to walk away and get a fresh perspective. So these worlds, for me, collide all the time. My baseball world is one where I am actively involved with specific baseball players, as well as just as a spectator visiting different places. And again, by going to different places, you get a new perspective. Even if I've been there once before, there's always something new to see. And there's a quote in the baseball world where, stick around for another game because you'll see something you've never seen before, which is really true. But you have to be open to that, and that's true in testing as well. You just simply have to allow yourself to be open, and you will see something new.
Thank you very much. You like soccer?
Yes.
Okay, just let's get started with the webinar.
Okay. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so as you know, my name is JeanAnn Harrison, and I'm a software test consultant for Project Realms, which is primarily located in Minnesota. I'm located, by the way, on the East Coast in the greater Boston area. And that's Boston, Massachusetts, in case anybody doesn't know where that is, just north of New York. So today's agenda, I am going to read this fairly quickly or go over certain high points. I would love for you to take notes, and there's a lot of text on certain slides. Please don't try to take those notes. You'll get the presentation sent to you, so you don't have to worry about that. But I still would like for you to take general notes and listen carefully. And please be active in responding. This is the way you learn as well as we all learn from each other. And I'm going to do a quick overview of the mobile and embedded software definitions, that kind of thing, and different types of mobile apps. So many people assume mobile apps means a mobile website, or they just mean native. There's more to it than that. So I want to make sure people understand what those differences are. And I would also like to explain a skill set for a mobile tester. So there's some unique skills that you really want to put some focus on, and to be aware how to rebuild or build those skills. I'm going to show you a mind map of how to get started with mobile testing, and keep in mind, again, all this information is for inspiration. Yes, you can follow these steps. Yes, you can formulate your own test cases, but you do need to understand that these are guidelines. These are not practices. I refuse to use the word practices. It's just ideas that can be applied, and I strongly encourage you to look at it that way. I also am going to talk a lot about exploratory testing, and this is something that the exercises are going to include. We're going to not only do some tests, but I want you to explore what other ideas can you come up with. So while you're seeing this, I want you to think about other ways to test. Again, this is to inspire you. So please be aware of that. And basically, we're going to learn about organization. How can we better organize our tests? And then I'll conclude with more test samples, test case examples, and exercises. So again, not covering user experience, usability, trainability, web application, and that means pure mobile websites. I won't be talking much about it. And security tests. You may find that something will inspire you, that you can come up with tests for that, but that's not what today's webinar is about. And I did want to say something else, but I'll move on. I'm sure I'll come up with it. Okay, so mobile and embedded software devices. These are the kinds of devices that we'll see mobile software, and we'll test mobile software, as well as embedded. Now, the difference between the two, as you can see for examples, they're proprietary devices that work on their own. Heart devices, law enforcement ticket generators, restaurant personnel taking orders on devices. I don't know if anybody has seen that, but I went to a restaurant in Miami last year, and I was so surprised that she had this little device. She was taking our order. I thought it was the coolest thing. So, of course, GPS devices. There's a lot of different devices out there. If you see somebody using something like I did in Miami, ask them about it. learn more about that proprietary device. You'll find some interesting ideas there. As far as embedded software, think about, your car system, your car computer system, or even going into an elevator. Of course, robots. You go into hospital rooms and you might find something there, like those monitors. That's all run by embedded software. Okay, so types of mobile apps, and I'm going to go through this quickly because I've gone through this before, but I want to make sure we go over it. There's native apps, web apps, and hybrid apps. Now, native apps are just local to the device, and that means that you download it, and there really is no interaction with communicating outside that device unless you get an update. So an example might be, a hybrid app, a good one is, an example would be Twitter or Facebook, because you're constantly communicating. So you're using something that interacts with the internet. So maybe a native app might be something where you're, gosh, I'm trying to think of a native app. Well, on my proprietary device, I had the heart monitor, and that really didn't communicate the actual functional work. It did communicate data out afterwards, but for the most part, it was pretty native. And then web applications, which the software is not local to the device. You're interacting strictly with the network. And then we're doing exploratory. Whoops, how did I? Yeah, I guess that's the right one. All right. I did want to explain this definition. And basically, I'm quoting James Bach. I'm not going to read this, but I strongly encourage you to learn about James's idea on exploratory testing. Please read his blog. He does an awful lot of talking or writing about exploratory testing, and I find it's the most close to what I do and how I approach exploratory testing. There are other people who have written about exploratory testing, and I would never say that they're wrong. I just simply say my approach is more close to James's approach. And defining skill set for the mobile embedded tester. Now, these skills were actually written out by my co-presenter for my upcoming tutorial full-day class at CAST. And it's in his book, John Hagar's book. And it came from Chapter 1, but I'm going to quickly go over some of this. So, for example, some of the exposure and knowledge about products from the domain will help you. So if you have some medical background, or if you have maybe some background from the automobile manufacturing world, those kinds of things are going to help. Another thing that, and you can get this while you're on the job, I certainly did with a heart monitor when I was thrust into the medical world of mobile software. I learned more about the heart than I cared to. But I learned a lot, and it did help me, inspired me for test design. And you need some of the hard science information. You need to learn more about math or physics or electronics. The engineering skills are very important for test design. It's just simply the skill of analytical thinking and critical thinking. Very, very important skills for an exploratory tester. So make sure that you try to gain as much as you can. Do a lot of reading. Do a lot of practicing. Some of the software sciences or soft sciences, psychology, physiology, sociology, human factors, all of these are going to help you become creative in your perspective, and certainly will help you in your test design. And of course, these skills are important for both mobile and standard, I said that word again, desktop testing, or I should say, or laptop testing. But one of the things that you really can get away with without having, I should say, for mobile testing is you can get away with, I'm sorry, let me try that again. You cannot get away with not having any domain knowledge. You really should have some domain. I worked on many client-server applications and web applications with no domain knowledge at all, and was able to come up with fairly good test design or test cases. The thing is with mobile is that there's so much that is not covered in requirements because people who do draw up those requirements simply do not understand mobile, and they don't understand mobile benchmarks. So it's important for you as the mobile tester to gain this knowledge so you can, as well as learning architecture, which is so critical to a mobile tester. I'm going to move on as I've talked too much on this. Here, again, this is the mind map. This is just to get started. It's included in the presentation to give you an idea of how many different facets of mobile testing there is and how many different ways you can think. Each of those colors represent a different type of thinking. It's a small text. It is available online at the ministryoftesting.com. Please go ahead and use this as inspiration. Okay, what you need to be a good exploratory tester, and I talk about this a lot. You have to have awareness, you have to have discipline, and you have to have focus. You need to be aware of what's going on around you. Just because you're doing some testing on battery, the drainage on your battery, if you don't notice how hot the device is, you could have problems later on where the device burns out because you're charging. You need to be aware, and then you need to understand, how to replicate those things for your development team. So awareness is key. It's very, very important to pay attention, and you pay attention to the entire system. This is different than when you're testing client-server. You don't need to be as aware. Of course, it's a good thing to be, but is probably the best way to put it. Discipline. You need to learn to stay on track. Very important for an exploratory tester. You need to stay on track. You can easily get sidetracked. I do, and stay focused. So that means that you have to go ahead and not let other distractions take you away from what you're doing. So be very, very conscious of these three specific facets. Okay, keys to mobile exploratory testing. And this is something that I think, I touched upon earlier. Domain knowledge. Timing. Timing is really important. You need to make sure you understand how quickly things have to be done from a user perspective, but also timing of anything has to be, it's so dependent upon the system. So keep in mind your clock. If your software is using time to record or to send to the user some sort of timing information, that timing comes from not the software, your application, but it comes from the operating system and the hardware. So you've got a physical clock that sits in your device, and then that has to talk to the software through your operating system. So there's three levels there you need to think about, and you have to test all of it. It's not something you can just say, oh, well, no, I don't need to. What if you have, for example, you're sending blood pressure information, or you're sending diabetes, your sugar levels to your doctor. Well, they're going to want to know what time that this information is being sent. And if you don't test for timing, that can certainly create problems. For example, time change. Here in the United States, we have daylight savings time and daylight standard time. Well, I can tell you from experience that if you don't test the fact that the clock automatically changes and your software recognizes it, guess what? You might have a problem with poor information or poor data. So be very aware of those things. Characteristics of bugs, behavior, formulate patterns. Try to look for patterns in things. I did several tests regarding patterns where I noticed a pattern, and it took me 4 days to figure out that it was a communication problem that wasn't related to my communication software, but instead it was related to my mobile app. And it took me so long to figure out that that software behavior was did not consider all the different paths or cases or situations when it came to how this communication software behaved. So if you know programming, I always say, think about a case statement. If this is the case, do this. If this is the case, do this. So if you have a case statement regarding all the behaviors, if you're testing all those cases, think about something that you might not think of, and look for that's the resolution in terms of the pattern. But you need to think about those patterns. You need to try different things. Okay, use life experiences for inspiration, and I do all the time. And I say that easily, but if you can think of any yourself, be open, be aware. You never know when you can be inspired. Okay, testing beyond the GUI. I talked briefly about this. I'm going to go through this really, really fast. Please do not think functional testing is all of your test coverage. It is so short-sighted. Please consider hardware and operating system as part of your normal, did I mention normal? Normal mobile app software testing. Absolutely is critical. And I can share examples. We'll be doing some examples shortly. Okay, what do we test? Uncover hidden bugs. You will be amazed at how you can uncover hidden bugs. Through system integration testing, I found an awful lot where I would go and do all different kinds of tests, just making a phone call to send data. I uncovered a memory leak. With firmware tests, I talked briefly about the timing. That's one example. What about your Bluetooth drivers? Are they working? Do they work with your software? What about interruptions, phone calls, while you're testing your application? All of these things you will find very interesting bugs, I promise. Yeah, I certainly did. And, developer tests and component integration tests are pretty much on the developer side of things, not the software tester. However, work with your developers closely because you do need to learn the architecture. You need to understand what happens when it's supposed to happen and what shouldn't happen when it's not supposed to happen. So there are different ways of looking at it. I used to use my log file to learn on my architecture, and I would see different behaviors. I would specifically test certain functions just to see what my log file tells me. One of the examples is testing my temperature of my device. It's really interesting to see how my log file displayed that information, and I work with my developer to make sure certain information was displayed. So you need to learn what should be displayed. And the only way you can do it is really work closely with your developers. Okay, here's an exercise. Now, in the question box, so, over to where you can enter information, I would like to ask people, what can you tell me other than functional tests? What kinds of tests would you think would be good to explore? I've mentioned a few. Sorry, that was my phone. I'm moving that away. So I'm sorry. Jan, I'm going to rely on you to respond to this.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Amy to get a question. I'm here, JeanAnn.
Okay. Maybe what we can do is go ahead and see what, anybody have any ideas? As I mentioned, I did mention a few, and I would really like to see people try. Julie, I know you're out there. Yes, I'm picking on you, and I'm picking on Terry. I expect something from both of you. Nothing? I was very disappointed. Don't look at me for all the answers. Oh, okay, okay.
Maybe we can move on and revisit?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Well, the point of this was to see if people knew something about it before I started giving out answers. I like to see people try before I can give out answers, but I'm happy to move on. One of the things that I will talk about are, common tools that I use for exploratory testing. I don't use software for organization except for my Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. That's really all I use. Well, I shouldn't say that because I also use my log. But I really don't sit and use a lot of different pieces of software. I do things manually, and the reason for that is because it's faster for me. Now, you got to use what works for you, what's best for you. So when I document, for example, my test conditions, I'm going ahead and I'm using a spreadsheet. But the interesting thing is while I'm testing, I'm going ahead and I'm using little sticky notes. Oh, well, I'm doing this test, and I should probably try this test, and what if I do this? Well, if you go ahead and you do that, you don't want to deviate from your original path. You really need to stick to your original path. So if that's the case, what I found was the quickest way for me to write down those ideas, which I was getting all the time, I would go ahead and I write myself sticky notes. Just little notes, enough information to remind me, okay, later on I need to go back and do that with these conditions. So I would write out the test idea and the test conditions that I needed to record. So I found that very, very helpful. Keep a log of what you're doing. Even if it's just handwriting something, I did this, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's important because you need to make sure when you write a bug, you know exactly what you did, you know exactly how to reproduce it, and you can share with other people. You may not be able to answer the question when somebody is revisiting that bug report or that situation. So make sure you do that. Okay. So what I wanted to say here is there are lots of ideas on this screen, but a lot of it's. Go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, we got some remarks for your exercises.
Oh, good. Okay, we'll go back to it.
Should I just read them? Performance tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, testing with interrupts while testing the mobile apps, network connectivity testing on the subway.
I like that one.
Subway, network hopping.
Good.
Those things we got.
Okay. Those are very generic. It's the right idea. And I'm glad people are thinking about stuff like that. I wanted some more specific ideas, but that's okay. That works for me. We'll go on and we'll explore some of those types of tests. So that's good. Thank you. And thank you all for responding. I'm sure Julie and Terry, who I did pick on, did actually respond, so I'm not going to pick on them anymore. Thank you. Okay, so I will say this with James Bach. We will become more exploratory when we can't tell what tests should be run in advance of the test cycle or when we haven't yet had the opportunity to create those tests. Okay, so here's some of ideas that you can do. Create your own description or theory. What happens when? Take the time to do that. Take the time to sit there before you start anything. Just what happens when? And write a little plan. And when I say a little plan, I don't mean step by step by step by step by step. I mean just general conditions is the fastest way to do this. What happens when your battery runs low? Have you explored that idea? What happens when your battery is charging from a dead battery? What happens when the device gets too hot? Have you thought about that? One of the problems with temperature, keep in mind your device is small. The hardware is contained in that small space. And I'm sure you've noticed when you charge your device, or even when you're just talking on the phone, because for a mobile phone, or using your tablet in general, it gets hot. It gets very hot. If you don't test your software's behavior in terms of making sure that device or the software application doesn't shut down when it gets too hot, you can damage the device. I've seen it happen. So too hot might be anything above 120 degrees, and that's Fahrenheit. In terms of Celsius, I'd say anything above 55 degrees Celsius. So keep in mind around that range.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. I'm talking about the slide. Jan, are you all right?
Sorry, I was just saying thank you for mentioning Celsius.
Oh, okay. Yes, I tried to do that. I'm actually more familiar with the Celsius temps than I am with the Fahrenheit. Okay, so what happens when your device memory is full, your storage? Have you seen what your application does? So again, these types of things that you want to think about, and you want to make sure that you include them in your exploratory, because I can tell you right now, from experience, there's very little written in terms of requirements about these things. So these particular listings here are important exploratory tests for you to apply. Here's an example of the battery test, charging the device, and just charging the device in terms of timing. That alone, yes, it's a hardware test, meaning that you're not necessarily including software, but I did go ahead and I had to do this because I found all kinds of funny behavior. Software not sending information based on how fast the device charged. If the device charged, the device was supposed to charge the battery within 4 hours. That's pretty much okay. But when the device charges in less than an hour, and when I say I'm talking from a dead battery to even 50%, in 15 minutes, there's a big problem there, and you will damage the device. So I broke it down, and I had my test condition app was uninstalled. I just turned on my device, and I was charging from a dead battery. And those were the increments I used. And then I went ahead and I said, okay, now I'm going to drain the battery again, and I'm going to have the app installed. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to have it installed. You would think that this would be a test that is kind of silly. But there were differences. There were differences in how fast the device charged based on the software. So all these conditions that I've included, I broke it down to this point because I did see different behavior. One of the things that I've told people is your software application needs to understand temperature and battery voltage and record that in your log. And when you do that, you can see what's going on when. Very important. And the software should be able to regulate how the battery is, not so much how the battery, but shut the device off if it gets too hot. That way your application is not going to create any problems, because one application behaves differently than another one, which is why you have to go ahead and say to your own software under test does need to regulate. So anyway, I'm going to move on. I just wanted to show you this particular breakdown, and we can get into it later on. Excuse me for coughing. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, here's an example of a test, and I wrote down all the steps that you can do. And this is not an exercise that we're doing. This is something for you to do in the future with regards to the battery charging. Okay? So I want you to pre-select any application, and download onto your device, or use the one that you're testing already. Drain the battery. Notate the time. Again, this seems really silly, but important. As I said, device charges too fast, it creates a very hot device, or I should say very hot battery. That battery usually sits very close to the modem, and you can burn out that modem within minutes. So be aware of, your timing. And plug in the charge. Immediately as soon as you plugged it in, go ahead and power up the device, record times for first condition when the app is not installed, and this is related to the previous slide. So it takes you through what those steps are. Okay, now we're going to do another exercise. And what I want you to do is to come up with some other tests that you can apply based on the condition of starting to charge from a dead battery. So go ahead and, Jan, you can maybe share some of those stories. Or would somebody like to actually take the mic and explain something? I would really love to hear from people.
Amy, is anyone there who wants to give their ideas and stories? Guess most people are...
They're sleeping.
Mode. Yeah.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I guess we'll move onward, and hopefully somebody will pipe in. Okay, well, this is, you know what, I'm not going to even do that because I'll give it a few more minutes, only because that slide gives gives away answers. But, well, all right, I'm going to move on because I hate to have dead air. So I will go ahead and now explain, and maybe somebody will come up with something different that's here. Okay, I talked about, and again, I'm organizing all the different tests. This is, all these, I should say, within these boxes here, they are different tests that I came up with while I was draining the battery and watching what was happening. So things like, your CPU speed. It makes a difference of when you're charging the device and your CPU speed is running full blast, say at 600 megahertz or so, and whether it's running at, say, 100 megahertz. You will see different behavior based on that. And you wouldn't think that it would make a difference, but the problem is that charging or doing something with your hardware does affect how the software behaves. You don't see it as much on a laptop or a desktop application because it simply has that much more resources available. A lot more memory, a lot more storage space, a bigger CPU. So you need to think about these things as examples. I have in red here, check the temperature at each increment. And I talked a little bit about those thresholds. We found that at 60 degrees Celsius that we didn't see any burning, but the temperature of the device became so hot that it actually hurt the skin. Now, because it was a heart monitor, elderly people are wearing this device, it's going to burn them. So you need to think about what is your customer base, what do they expect, and that way you can then figure out thresholds. And so we figured our threshold was actually at 55 degrees. That was better because 60, I believe, is something like 130 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. And of course, you touch something at 130 degrees, it's going to hurt, especially somebody with sensitive skin. So you really need to think about these things when you're coming up with tests. Again, this is a test that is not going, you're not going to have a requirement for it because people don't think about those things when they're writing requirements before the design is being done. So sometimes these exploratory tests are actually designed to give information to the development team and the planning team and your other stakeholders like marketing and sales so that they know themselves what they can do to make the product higher quality. So your exploration is so critical because you are truly giving information. You're not necessarily testing to make sure it works. Think about it as testing to give critical information to your stakeholders. Okay.
Some more remarks in for the exercise, JeanAnn.
Oh, good. Okay.
From Terry, as the battery is being charged, try turning on your app.
Yes, that I did include in my, thank you, Terry. I did include here in this, let's see, app running with function, app running no function. So row 4 and 5 does include that. Can anybody think of any other type of test condition, any different type of function?
Yeah, we got another one on different types of chargers. Wall charger, charger.
Fabulous. Yes. Yes, indeed. That would make a difference, certainly. So if you, well, one thing, and thank you for that, because that just gave me an idea. And I'm not sure if you're meaning this yourself, so I'm not trying to steal your thunder. But with the Kindle Fire, I know for myself I had to buy a separate charger that would charge faster than its original charger. And that charger, if you were to charge using that device, say for example you're releasing an application to work on with both chargers, well, you're going to have to test both chargers. So that might be of interest. Thank you. That was a good one. I like that. I never thought of it that way, but that's good.
What do you think of removing the battery while charging?
Oh, good point. Yes. Why not? I haven't done as much testing on mobile phones, but yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and take the battery out. Different ways of doing that. While it's charging, while you got it plugged in, go ahead and take it out. And then maybe, have the condition where the application is turned off, there's nothing running, you're just charging the phone itself, and you take the battery out, then put it back in, keep charging, turn on your device, turn on your application. What happened? That's a really interesting idea. I just come up with like 10 ideas just with that one condition. So really, really good idea. Thank you. Anybody else?
And we have to see how our device shows messages when we connect a different charger to it.
Yes. Well, again, I think I relate that more to the different charger. Oh, you mean like, I wonder if the person means, I've done this by accident once. I plugged my Kindle Fire charger to my phone and then see if it would work. And you know what? I don't remember the result because it was at night and I didn't care and I just wanted both of them charged. But that might be an interesting test to do. So to see whether or not it was charging, to see whether or not it affected any software. That would software, again, this is all about trying to, because we're software testers here. We're not hardware testers. So we want to see what the behavior of the software is based on these conditions. So, good.
Yeah, they keep coming in now, switching off the phone while charging.
Yeah, see, this is what I wanted. This is great. Absolutely. Switching off the phone while charging and then turning it back on again and seeing, again, how the software behaved. at different levels. Really, really good idea. It's great that you guys are thinking, you guys, listen to me, you people, you attendees, are thinking about different things. And this is the point, is that when we work with other people, we become inspired by different ideas. You never know where the inspiration is going to come from. So I'm going to move on because our time is starting to run out a little bit, and I want to get through a couple more. So great. Thank you very much. And does anyone have any ideas on, oh, we have that, okay. So I talked about this screen here a little bit with memory usage. One of the things that I found was that even my storage, searching an onboard database was affected by charging the device. So all these things you have to consider if you have an onboard database. And again, that database is limited in its resources because it is not something that sits on a server. It is on board. It's not a relational database because why? You don't have the space for something like that. So you're going to have to come up with different ideas from learning more about your architecture. I cannot stress that enough. You have to sit down and spend time with your developer, read code, sit there and ask questions. But make an appointment with your developer. Don't just go over and say, hey, show me this, teach me this. That's a really good way to make enemies with your developing team. Make an appointment. Ask for their help. They are willing to teach you for the most part as long as you're open and willing to learn, and they're very happy to help. So, okay, you can read this later. I just wanted to show you that. And then, again, this one was written by John Hagar for our conference in April. And I'm going to go ahead and just mention signal inputs and outputs for your testing. What kinds of things can be an input and what can be an output? So this might be a notification. Testing your email notifications. Does the output respond with an email notification of some sort, whether it's the LED light flashing and saying, hey, you got a notification, or whether or not it's only a signal, an icon on the phone itself. I know the Droids, they pretty much do not have an LED light, depending on the model. But I know the iPhone does display LED light. It depends upon what kind of device you have. So those kinds of things you want to think about. Again, I'm going to let you read this at a later time. Exercise notification. As we speak, the notification. So what I'd love for you to do, if you have a drained device, hopefully you've already downloaded Twitter or Facebook. Then I want you to start either downloading, we're going to download the app now. That's what we're going to do. So I want you to download, why would I say download and then I'm losing my mind here. I apologize. You already have downloaded, and that's what I wanted you to do. So then from another device, send an email, and if you can. And immediately send a tweet or post a status on Facebook. And then continue to engage Twitter or Facebook app for at least a minute. So this is going to take a little bit. Just keep doing it until you see your email notification. And note in general how long it took to do that. And also think about what other observations you might have. So if we can take a minute to do this, Jan, that would be really great. And in the meantime...
I'm doing it myself as well.
Oh, okay, great. Go ahead. Love to see that. I'll just hang. I'm not singing. I promise you I won't sing.
So this is how you spent your weekends?
No, I spend more time writing than I do anything else. But yes, I do. It's funny because while I'm writing or doing something, I'll go ahead and I'll be like, ooh, I wonder what happens if I do this. I wonder what happened. So again, the constant inspiration. If I'm so interested that I want to know, yeah, I just sit there and I will test it. I'm kind of weird that way. It comes down to an insatiable need for knowledge. I always want to know. And again, it helps me to gain more stories to share with people so that they can be further inspired and come up with new ideas. Earlier, the exercises were, the answers were wonderful, different ways of thinking about things, and I'm hopeful in the same here that there will be some, what other observations you have, maybe we'll come up with something new that will further add to the many different types of tests that we can do.
Okay, this is my email arriving.
Oh, good. Okay, so that wasn't too bad of a time frame. You did it, with what I expected. Now, the curious thing I have there is, what did you notice about your application that you were engaging in when you received that notification? So this is where the awareness of what's happening beyond what you're doing is so critical. This is what I was talking about earlier. So many times people are not paying attention enough to other things. I'm not saying that you did that. I'm just saying in general. So it's not it's not easy. It really is not easy to do.
But you're right. I was not paying attention or not paying attention.
Well, again, that's not what you normally do, John, so that's fine. But at the same time, it's interesting if you think about it as an exercise on your own. To, if you are finding something that really bothers you, and this is what customers go through when they're looking at their apps that they've downloaded. They will get angry if something happened where they didn't notice it. I can share with you one of the things that I found when I was testing a game. I'm playing a game, and I got no notification, no audio, no visual of notifications of stuff coming in, including the phone, because I did test that. Now, this was a particular game that I went, why in the world would I keep this thing? The only time I could use it, really, that I would feel safe using it would be late at night. And then I wouldn't have to care about anything coming in right away. So, that's not a good application to keep. And I didn't keep it very long. So these are the things you want to consider when you're testing your application. So can anyone else share anything? And then we'll move on.
We're watching a spinning from Melinda. That's what Melinda is saying.
You're watching it spinning. Watching what spinning?
I don't know. Melinda, what are you watching spinning?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I'm waiting for Amy.
Oh, okay.
We got 5 more minutes. You want to handle some questions?
Yeah, I think that's probably best. I'm going to go through really important. Lots of Stack Overflow problems because, again, the device was out. And I'm going to leave up my information, and I'm going to remind everyone I am facilitating the weekend testing session on risk-based testing for mobile devices. And please follow me on Twitter, and you'll get all the information. So hopefully, or go ahead and send me an email. That's perfectly fine as well. Okay, questions?
Okay, we got a question on MMS call logs. What major criteria are taken into consideration when testing MMS call logs?
Well, I have not tested that, so I can't say specific information on that. What I would do is go ahead and set up something in terms of like what your customer would see or what a user would see, and then go ahead and think about, well, first of all, you can always do the charger test. I mean, that charger test, it's very interesting how much the software behaves. Now, with SMS logs, I think you're going to go ahead and or feeds rather, you're going to go ahead and you're using a web server that you're dealing with. So really, a lot of the action is going to be on that, not necessarily the device. You could test, think of it in tests of user tests. So how does it read? How does it fit on the screen? Those kinds of things. And Dr. Philip Liu, who is the CEO of XBOSoft or XBOSoft, he does a fabulous presentation on usability tests. And he would probably have some great ideas. As an FYI, there is in planning, Dr. Liu and I will be doing a conjoined webinar on usability testing for mobile, so be aware of that. And if you look for where he's, yes, yeah, we'll see. Second week might be better. We'll see. My calendar is so filled. But anyway, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we go ahead and talk about, usability testing in general. But Dr. Liu, please check him out. Look for him online. And Jan, I think you can share that information with the attendees today, because he does really do an amazing job on usability testing. So I hope that gives you some ideas. Like I said, I'm not as familiar with SMS, so certainly there are ideas out there, and I would apply some of what I've done to that. But keep in mind that it's more of a website type of testing and usability testing than it is for native and hybrid apps.
So just we do one last question, and
okay.
Then close it off. We got a question. What is your test approach with new devices that are not yet launched in the market? How do you handle that?
Well, this is where I've gone ahead and I've used the test that I've come up with regards to the hardware conditions. So if you're talking mobile phones and say mobile tablets, which is what I'm thinking about from this point of view, is that you have to be able to go ahead and test, again, have your own devices in your test labs. Now, you can't have every device that there is because it's just impossible, but you do want to go ahead and utilize, there are companies out there that you can use online and well, I don't consider it cloud testing, because I consider cloud testing more one server and you can test whatever. In this case, it's mobile cloud, which to me seems like a weird turn of phrase, but you're going ahead and you're calling out. Device Anywhere is one company that does it, as well as Perfecto Mobile. And both of them, if you go ahead and you call you set up an account, call their company in terms of however they do that, and you actually can choose a device that's there and test as if it's right in front of you. So it's not complete control, but it certainly helps along the way. So if they'll get test devices that haven't even been released yet, from what I understand, so that may help in that regard. But I would apply, in general, your hardware conditions and your operating system conditions and test that way. Again, it's not 100%, but these tests are close enough where you can pretty much apply to any type of a device, whether they're released or not. Again, you probably will have differences, and you have to accept risks. And I would go ahead and think about the risks involved and test accordingly. I mean, I'd like to give more specific information, but honestly, that would take me too long, and we just don't have that time.
I'd like to add from XBO experience, it is possible to get prototypes from the device builders. So
Yes, that's true. Yes, great point.
JeanAnn, I think we're going to end. It's 6 here and 12 there. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay.
It was great. We all learned a lot. Follow JeanAnn on Twitter. And we're going to see you soon, right, with Dr. Phil Liu?
Yes, we will be together, well, not physically, but we'll be on hopefully in September. And I'm doing a full-day tutorial at CAST. If anybody's interested, there is still time to register. Look online at CAST 2013, and you'll find us. It's the Association for Software Testing, and our conference is called CAST. So go ahead and do that, although there are, according to the website, 17 days left before it starts. So hopefully you can join us. If not, there are some great books out there. We're doing our tutorial based on John Hagar, Hagar. John Hagar's book. It's listed in my references here. So it's something that you can go ahead and purchase, and it should be available within the next month. Julian Hardy has some wonderful books as well on mobile testing. Karen Johnson, James Bach have, and Jonathan Cole has a book out. So take a look at these people's books. I've read John Hagar's. I've read a little bit of Jonathan Cole. He does cover quite a bit. And who else? Julian Hardy. He's well known in the mobile testing world, and he comes at it from a developer point of view. So check him out.
Okay. Thank you very much, JeanAnn.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Bye.
Bye.